a political party. And at that point, it was a Republican seat that was open. And that became the beginning of my public service career, even though my background is really in business, it's in finance, it's in big corporations, GE, and also running small businesses of my own. And just in the last 10 years, working at a finance business that is an investment firm as well, which is very interesting and timely given all that's happening right now. But from there, I was also asked to sit on the State Board of Education, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and then on my local board of selectmen. So I come with a lot of local background and knowledge in that area. But education was such a passion, and it showed right off the bat because I was ready to get going. That's how they convinced me to run for a House seat. And this is something I think the public really should know, that our state agencies like the Department of Education or the Department of Transportation or even the governor's office, they are a body that suggests proposals to make changes with regards to the way our state runs, but they are not allowed to make the final decision. They propose, but the legislature decides. That's also true with the president of the United States. But the governor can propose an agenda. She can propose a budget, but she can't pass it. She can't make it hers or law. It has to go through the legislative body. And I had a few frustrating moments about things I thought should be changed. Bilingual education, which was keeping kids in that program too long and not really empowering them with the knowledge of the English language to be successful. And they said, well, Tony, if you really want to make a change, you have to serve on the education committee of the legislature. And that did it for me. And they were right. Working on the education committee those first few years was a truly exciting time. We did some extraordinary things. Reading accountability, not trying to reduce social promotion. If kids couldn't read by the third grade, they were sure to fail. Early childhood education, having preschool slots for disadvantaged kids, accountability, educational excellence of different types. And we were able to pass that. And I would say I'm very proud of the fact that during that time, we raised Connecticut's stature all the way up to being the #1 public school system in America. Unfortunately, though, I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, things have gone decidedly backwards, not as positive as they have been. And I think that coincides, by the way, with our financial situation as well. Our state budget, well, there's a lot of things that have happened. And that leads me to an interesting area because, as you know, education is a passion of mine. Transportation is a passion of mine, which we will talk about. But one of the areas that I'm growing increasingly interested in and concerned about is Connecticut's tax policy. As I've said to you before, I work in the financial services industry. Finance is an area of expertise. And I have found that, as with anything, that money is a very strong incentive and driver of human behavior. And when you have a tax policy for a state, you're competing with other states that have other tax policies that might be more advantageous to an individual. A good example is I visited a lot of Weston homes during this campaign. And one of the homes I visited had 2 Democratic registered individuals. They were senior citizens. And we had quite an extensive conversation, which was wonderful for me to be able to. They opened their home to me. It was certainly someone from the other side of the political aisle, and we started to talk about the estate tax, which was of great interest to them. They had no idea that in the state of Connecticut, how really negative this tax has been. In fact, when I first started in the legislature, the powers that be at that time understood that that was a disincentive for individuals of Connecticut to stay here, retire here, and actually die here. And they quickly tried to eliminate that over a period of 8 or 9 years. And we were just getting close to eliminating it altogether. People were starting to reconsider that they should stay here. People that have a great deal of money, that they were benefactors to a lot of our hospitals and our nonprofits and so forth. But then they reversed that. And they started to put it back in place. And in fact, it's a $2 million threshold that if you have assets and property that reach $2 million, you're taxed, and this is something that they didn't realize, you're taxed not from anything over the $2 million threshold, but from the first dollar, the first penny that you have in your state. Well, this family was just shocked about this. And they said, well, this is not good for us either. I said, well, you need to talk to your Democratic leadership to get this changed. And why hasn't it changed? The reason it hasn't changed is because the majority leadership in the legislature wants to bargain for something else, a millionaire's tax, another tax, a tax, it changing the tax structure in a way that is not acceptable to the governor.
They're still talking about the million, now that we don't have any millionaires anymore.
Well,
get it,
right? Isn't it interesting how times have changed so dramatically since we had that? But that's just an example of we have other tax issues too. We have a $250 business entity tax on any business, whether you make any money or not. It's just an additional situation where, and not to mention the state income tax, which a lot of people are very concerned about, which takes us to where we are today. Why are we in such a difficult situation? By the way, we got the state income tax back when we were in deficit before. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, they had spent down their entire rainy day fund, and they had nowhere else to go other than cut, or actually put in that state income tax. And it was put in thinking that was going to be our panacea, that was going to save us. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't panned out because, unfortunately, Connecticut is not a diversified economy. So many of the other businesses have left, whether it's the insurance industry or manufacturing, defense. And as a result, so much of our state income taxes are tied to individuals that are in finance, that are in investment firms, that are tied to the roller coaster of the stock market. And as a result, our state revenues are on a roller coaster ride, and that ride is now down. And it has not become a dependable tax, and it's causing us some serious problems. One of the questions that was an intriguing question during this last election was, well, what can you do being in the minority? You have, so many others, that are in the majority by such large numbers, and I'll remind them that oftentimes, most times, the individual that is representing you is more important than actually the political party. Their ability to get things done, the ability to have good ideas, the ability to be a strong voice. And that happened in 2007. 2007, I was one of only 44 out of 151 that decided that the budget that was being presented, which had an over $1 billion tax increase, was not appropriate for the times that were coming. Mm-hmm. And so we put out our own budget, which was extraordinary because, the stack was really set against us. But it was such a good proposal that actually it won the day. It won the approval of both the governor's office and the majority party because the public got it. They sided with it, as did the media as well. They took a good look and they said, this is the right thing to do. And in the year after that, in 2008, we also were able to persuade the majority to hold a special session to prevent a new tax on gas because we have the highest gas tax there is. We had other proposals on the table as well to mitigate the deficit situation we had. That was not acceptable to the majority. However, I think that by constantly putting the right issues before the public and good alternatives, we did meet in special session because our deficit is growing so rapidly. By the way, we started off in a better position than most other states. We actually had a fairly sound budget. We were in the black. This has just been a remarkable turn because, again, we're tied so closely to the stock market and to the professions that rely on their jobs through the financial services industry. So it turned rather rapidly. And unfortunately, because spending was so high over that period of years, we have structural costs that are not, I don't believe, sustainable. So an effort to look at a $300 million shortfall in this year, where we had a surplus only a few months before, we met before Thanksgiving. Yeah. And unfortunately, that was not productive as far as I'm concerned. It was just taking a look at things that were easy to do. In other words, pass on some federal reimbursements that were about $100 million, or some other things, take advantage of some surpluses we had in budgets and just carried them forward. That's not the hard work that really needs to be done. If we're going to be faced with, by the way, the $300 million shortfall is now closer to an $800 million shortfall.
No Fooling.
No fooling. In fact, and one of the strategies is to, on some people's part, and possibly the majority party, is to just let it go. If they let it go with no action, it just is taken out